أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, today we are starting a new topic which will be related to what we sort of discussed during the past week's retreat. In the past week's retreat, we were studying Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, the right path, the straight path. And as we were studying this topic, probably we touched upon what we are going to study today. Today's topic is about an interpretation of the verse, وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. And he who has been given wisdom has been given great good. So if you can tell the page number for 12th word. 143. 143. So yeah, for that large book it is there. For the others, yeah, 143. Okay. So and in this text there's going to be a comparison which between the wisdom of what Quran is offering and the wisdom of philosophy. And the author, when he mentions philosophy, he is using it a little in the larger sense of the word, not necessarily what you would understand from philosophy, but more so in the sense that, let's say, alternative way of finding wisdom from the creation. Like there are two major ways to talk about wisdom within creation. One would be how the revelation, the speech of God, wants us to see the purpose of existence. The other one would be humans trying to extract meaning by themselves. So this is why actually it makes sense that the verse is using in passive sense, saying that, and who has been given wisdom has been given great good. Like the verse is not saying, and who has found wisdom has found great good. The verse is not saying that, but the verse is saying that he who has been given wisdom is given great good. So the comparison would be, do you find wisdom or are you given wisdom? This is going to be the distinction. And for that, the author is going to make a comparison between Quranic wisdom and the wisdom of philosophy. Inshallah, today we will be reading the first principle. And I'll look for a volunteer to read.
Is this a new topic or is it connected to anything previously?
So this is related to what we have been studying for Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, because in Sirat al-Mustaqim there were extremes. Like the extremes were, let's say, let's go with your topic, let's say intellect. For intellect, one extreme was to not think at all. The other extreme were trying to just overthink and find truth by yourself, or claim to find truth by yourself. So much so that you start making up things, convincing yourself that, well, maybe we don't exist. Maybe that's not real, like coming up with such stuff. And the Sirat al-Mustaqim in this case would be going with the wisdom of the Quran. So this would be the distinction. So related in this sense, but we can also take it as an independent topic. So we are studying a new topic in this sense. I'm looking for a volunteer to read. She is volunteering, but she doesn't know how to read. Okay. So
I think like the translation.
okay, you can read from that book then. And here's your mic.
How much am I reading?
Until the second principle.
Okay, the 12th word. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, and he who has been given wisdom has been given great good. Which is a Quranic ayah, Baqarah 269. This word consists of a brief comparison between the sacred wisdom of the All-Wise Qur'an and the wisdom of philosophy and science, and a concise summary of the instruction and training which Quranic wisdom gives to man in his personal life and social life, and an indication of the Quran's superiority to other divine words and to all speech. There are 4 principles in this word. The first principle: look through the telescope of the following story, which is in the form of a comparison, and see the differences between Quranic wisdom and that of philosophy and science. One time, a renowned ruler who was both religious and a fine craftsman wanted to write the All-Wise Qur'an in a script worthy of the sacredness in its meaning and the miraculousness in its words, so that its marvel displaying stature will be arrayed in wondrous apparel. The artist king therefore wrote the Quran in a truly wonderful fashion. He used all his precious jewels in its writing in order to indicate the great variety of its truths. He wrote some of its embodied letters in diamonds and emeralds, and some in rubies and agate, and other sorts in brilliance and coral, while others he inscribed with silver and gold. He adorned and decorated it in such a way that everyone, those who knew how to read and those who did not, were full of admiration and astonishment when they beheld it, especially in the view of the people of truth, since the outer beauty was an indication of the brilliant beauty and striking adornment in its meaning. It became a truly precious antique. Then the ruler showed the artistically wrought and bejeweled Quran to a European philosopher and to a Muslim scholar. In order to test them and for reward, he commanded them, each of you write a work about the wisdom and purposes of this. First the philosopher, then the scholar composed a book about it. However, the philosopher's book discussed only the decorations of the jewels and their relationships and conditions, and the properties of the jewels, and described them. It did not touch on their meaning at all, for the European had no knowledge of the Arabic script. He did not even know that the embellished Quran was a book, a written piece expressing a meaning, but he rather looked on it as an ornamented antique. He did not know any Arabic, but he was a very good engineer, and he described things very aptly, and he was a skillful chemist and an ingenious jeweler. So this man wrote his work according to those crafts. As for the Muslim scholar, when he looked at the Quran, he understood that it was the perspicuous book, the All-Wise Qur'an. This truth-loving person neither attached importance to the external adornments, nor busied himself with the ornamented letters. He became preoccupied with something that was 1,000,000 times higher, more elevated, more subtle, more noble, more beneficial, and more comprehensive than the matters with which the other man had busied himself. For discussing the sacred truths and lights of the mysteries beneath the veil of the decorations, he wrote a truly fine commentary. Then the two of them took their works and presented them to the illustrious ruler. The ruler first took the philosopher's work. He looked at it and saw that the self-centered and nature-worshipping man had worked very hard, but had written nothing of true wisdom. He had understood nothing of its meaning. Indeed, he had confused it and been disrespectful towards it, and ill-mannered even, for supposing that source of truths, the Quran, to be meaningless decoration. He had insulted it as being valueless in regard to meaning. So the wise ruler hit him over the head with his work and expelled him from his presence. Then he looked at the work of the other, the truth-loving, scrupulous scholar, and saw that it was an extremely fine and beneficial commentary, a most wise composition, full of guidance. Congratulations, may God bless you, he said. Thus, wisdom is this, and they call those who possess it knowledgeable and wise. As for the other man, he was a craftsman who had exceeded his mark. Then, in reward for the scholar's work, he commanded that in return for each letter, 10 gold pieces should be given him from his inexhaustible treasury. If you have understood the comparison, now look and see the reality. The ornamented Quran is this artistically fashioned universe, and the ruler is the pre-eternal all-wise one. As for the two men, one, the European, represents philosophy and its philosophers, and the other, the Quran and its students. Yes, the all-wise Quran is a most elevated expounder, a most eloquent translator of the mighty Quran of the universe. Yes, it is the criterion which instructs man and the jinn concerning the signs of creation inscribed by the pen of power on the pages of the universe and on the leaves of time. It regards beings, each of which is a meaningful letter, as bearing the meaning of another. That is, it looks at them on account of their maker. It says how beautifully they have been made, how exquisitely they point to their maker's beauty, thus showing the universe's true beauty. But the philosophy they call natural philosophy or science has plunged into the decorations of the letters of beings and into their relationships and has become bewildered. It has confused the way of reality, while the letters of this mighty book should be looked at as bearing the meaning of another, that is, on account of God. They have not done this. They have looked at beings as signifying themselves. That is, they have looked at beings on account of beings and have discussed them in that way. Instead of saying how beautiful they have been made, they say how beautiful they are and have made them ugly. In doing this, they have insulted the universe and made it complain about them. Indeed, philosophy without religion is a sophistry divorced from reality and an insult to the universe.
Jazakallah khairan.
Finally, because you asked me earlier, we have read this before in case we want to read them.
Okay, so when did we read it? So the people who remembers reading this? 1, 2 people remembers? Okay. 2.5. Okay. I mean, since you said somewhat, I mean, that's why I count half. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I would say let's read then. Okay. So it's worthy to read, and it's going to be a reminder for those who read it before. Okay. So any initial comments? Any initial summary, maybe? Like overall, in a nutshell, let me go through the metaphor that he is making, then we can go into details. But there's a king who, like you see those Quran verses written over there. So some of those letters are actually written with gold, literally. So saying that Quran is so valuable, that king in the metaphor makes a Quran written with all precious jewels, some of them with gold, some of them with emerald and whatnot. And it's also written in a way that the jewels are chosen related to the meanings. So the text is already meaningful, but on top of that, they chose all these artistic tools in a way that it's related to the meaning. But the king wanted to see how people understand, how people approach this art. And he gives it to two people. One is a philosopher and author, in this case, uses European. And this is related to the way that he was writing it. Back then it was written in, let's say, the Ottoman Empire time, in their East versus West. So he's referring to Europe. You can take it as Western culture. So this book is now being given to a European philosopher or a scientist, and he analyzes the book and writes, let's say, a PhD thesis about it, and then also given to a Muslim scholar, and both of them are writing a book about that. So this is the metaphor here. And then the European scholar takes the book and just doesn't even know that it's a book, but he talks about a very good statistician. So he calculates how many times this letter wow is appearing in there, how many times it appears at the beginning of the word, how many times in the middle, how many times in the end. So he gives a very detailed distribution of how the letters are there, how many times wow appears with gold, with emerald, this and that, super detailed statistical analysis. But that's all he does. No meaning whatsoever. It's just a book of relations among letters. The other scholar takes it as at his hand and realizes that this is Quran, this is a book, and then starts interpreting the meanings of the verses rather than busying himself with those arts or ornaments and whatnot. So that is the story in a nutshell. And then he relates this to the real life. What do you think? Who wants to take the other side of it in real life? Kadir, would you like to take how it applies to real life? Okay.
Like one way I understand is that like how you can take it to real life is the experiences that you have and how you understand those experiences. So you go through different things in life, and if you do not think about them in a meaningful way, then those experiences would be just like numbers or stats. For example, like I know you fell off a bike once or twice or thrice in your life, but if you look at those things and then you analyze those things in your life, I think there is meaning to be gathered from there as well. And as for the Quran itself, like when you're reading the Quran, you try to get meaning out of it and you take it as a speech of the creator to you, and you just not take the like Arabic written over there and then you just recite the Arabic or things like that. But that is how I personally understand it.
Okay. Anybody else from sister's side? Now that we heard two brothers by force, we can ask sisters. Sisters are generally volunteering to talk. So, Jazakallah khairan.
I guess as you were kind of running down through the summary, I was thinking of, hopefully this is the correct example, but when we last talked about it, I think you gave the example of the rose, of somebody who saw the rose and was like, let me study the petal, measure everything, and like just figure out the actual physicality of the rose. And then another person comes in and is like, oh, a rose. Somebody must have left this because they want, like, they love me or something, but like it was an expression and they weren't just focused on the shape, form, etc. So if you focus so heavily on the dimensionality and how that rose looks, the color, you might have actually missed the meaning that rose had to offer. So I think that's what I recall. So hopefully it's in the right context.
Zareen, yeah, that's very beautiful.
I guess an initial reaction I have, sorry, is that I guess if we take it in this sense where like everything has this meaning, like if I think about my life, then there's just so many things that are probably happening to me that I have like no, it seems like beyond my ability to even see all these like different like meanings that could be like within like certain events that I'm doing. I guess like if, for example, I'm walking on the street and I hear something, like my initial reaction would just be to like, I happen to pass by this person who happened to say this thing, like whatever, let me just go on my way. But I guess from this reading, that I guess maybe from what I understand, the correct attitude would be this maybe happened for a reason, like I was in this position, I heard this, that should like say something to me and I should figure out what that is. But then there's so many of these moments that like feels a bit impossible to like look at life that way, I guess. So
Yeah, and as you're passing microphone to Dua, I should also add a question. So what is the major difference of attitude between these two people? Like if you were to say that this is where they differ the most, where does the difference start happening? Because at the end, the outcome is totally different, but where does this, like the fork start opening? Where do they differ the first? Yeah.
I think to answer your question, I would say there is a lack of understanding what the Quran is. Because even if you did, because they did say the European didn't understand the Arabic script, but in real life, like even when people do understand the Arabic script, sometimes they're reading the Quran from like a viewpoint of like, oh, yeah, it's a history book. It's just, a guy wrote it like 1400 years ago. So they appreciate this guy for being so, eloquent and so good at Arabic and so good at poetry, but they wouldn't really appreciate it. As long as you don't see it as God's speech, you won't appreciate it for what it is telling you. But a more real life example of where I see this sort of a difference is when people who, for example, don't understand Arabic still focus on reading the Quran in Arabic, because we have too many ideas out there that, oh, like reading the Quran will give you more like good deeds in the original language, right? Because the translation is in Arabic. So that person, and a lot of people do this, they recite the Quran very beautifully. They don't understand what it means at all. That person will only be able to appreciate, the flow, the rhyme of the words. Like, oh, this is so beautiful. Like, look at Allah's speech, look at how it rhymes, but they won't really be able to appreciate anything deeper within. Compared to someone who, let's say, isn't even reading the Arabic and they're just reading the meaning, but they would be able to appreciate much more because they understand what it is saying. They can see how it fits within a historical context and also still is relevant to their lives. So yeah.
So that's right for Quran, but the Quran portion was a metaphor. Like this was the metaphor, and then he said that the Quran in this story looks to the creation, the universe. Like when it applies to Quran, the metaphor is understandable, but now when it applies to universe, the Quran that's written in these jewels is actually the tree out there. Like the author is referring to the tree out there, or referring to a sunrise, or a beautiful baby, or a car crash accident that you have been into. Like things are happening in this life. An author says actually this existence, the universe that you live in, is a book like Quran. Or is it? Like, do you take it as a book and interpret it accordingly? Or do you just take it as some ornamented artistry on which you do statistical analysis of how many times this particle exists, what is the atomic number? Now that I see two physicists in there, what is the atomic number? Like this is what we keep studying in natural sciences, for example. Do we treat the universe as a book? Or do we treat it as just some artistry, which is beautiful, and we do appreciate, we do see some relationship between them, but this relationship does not entail any meaning. We just say, well, I don't interpret. But then I just tell you, when it comes to, what is it, dropping an object, I kept dropping it a million times. Each and every time, this was the coefficient with which it fell down. So I made a very precise calculation, and I tell you the number to like 10 digits after 0.0, and then saying that with this is the statistical number, and it's called whatever constant. I gave it a name. So what is the difference between these two, the major distinction between them? One considers it as something that refers to things beyond, but the other one says, no, it only talks about itself. Is this distinction clear? No? So, yes. Can we take the microphone there? Okay.
So I think my understanding is that when we look at an object, we see it as an object that doesn't, what you're saying is there's nothing beyond its pure like physical existence that it's pointing to. Like there's nothing there to read meaning of. And going back to the rose example, it's like saying you cannot, like the distinction comes when one of the paths says you cannot infer anything beyond itself, like the color or the size or shape from this, while the other says, no,
there is all that, but then it's pointing to a creator. In the other example, it seems like it is its own creator almost. Like there's nothing external that put it there. There's nothing in its past and its future. It's just that existing right at there in that moment. And then you can only, it's limiting to how much you can know of every experience or everything that you see.
Yeah. What do you expect from it? So the expectations are different. Like in this case, the expectation of two people are different from the same thing. Like the example, a simple example for that is from here, if you take 95 north, you will see a like blue, what's it, metal, which says New York. Like on this piece of metal, it says New York. Is New York this plate? Definitely not. Although it says New York, it's not New York. If you just go and analyze, oh, it says NEWYORK, and there's an arrow, like you can talk about all the measures and numbers and everything on this plate. But did you say anything about that plate really? You can say, well, I made all the measures. It is 2x4. It is, I don't know, blue color. It has these letters. It has an arrow pointing this way, that way. But you missed the whole point that the metal in there is a message bearer. It points to the New York City. The point of this plate to tell you where New York City is. But you get stuck with the plate itself. You didn't take it as a sign for the New York City. So you made a statistical analysis of, or the scientific measurement of that blue plate itself, but never talked about what it is for. Yes.
So, I mean, I don't so something I don't understand. So why would he compare an Islamic scholar with a European philosopher that does not understand the Arabic script? Because if it, like that philosopher had the Quran, and if he doesn't understand the script, there's no way he's going to get the knowledge and the wisdom that he's supposed to get from the Quran. And it's the same thing. If someone doesn't know how to read English, they wouldn't know that, like, even if they, you know, they could see, but they won't know that this is to New, like the, whatever, the plate is saying that this is towards New York. I'm just assuming that does the author mean that in order to be able to read the universe, we should have a certain knowledge or a certain language? You know, not like the language, like the Arabic language, but, you know, something that, yeah, I don't know, some knowledge, not just like, not anyone can read the universe the way it's supposed to be read.
Very good point. Very good point. And yes, Dua.
I thought it meant sort of like you're missing something when you're not able to appreciate the Quran correctly. You're missing something essential in there. It's almost like if you explain wavelengths to a blind person, they won't be able to see because they are missing sight. So it's sort of like that. Like when you get into wavelengths, like even if you are able to see, like you're not able to appreciate it. So in that sense, you're still like a blind person. I sort of thought of it that way.
Okay, so let's give a practical example. We have an Egyptian here. There's my Egyptian. Okay, we have an Egyptian. So the Egyptian hieroglyphs were there for centuries, but people know that it's a language, but they didn't know how to read. But they knew that it's a language. They knew that it expresses some meaning, but we don't know how to read it. They didn't say that, well, this is just pictures. I mean, no meaning. It's just artistry, some random drawings. But once they were searching for a way to figure out what that language is, and when they found Rosetta Stone, their hieroglyph versus, was it Babylonian, like some other language, like the same agreement is written in two languages side by side, and they know the other language, so they were able to decipher this language. Then they started reading hieroglyphs. But they never said that, well, these are just random shapes, just happen to be there. And we are like no author, no whatsoever. So we'll just take them as they are. It looks nice, we'll just draw them. But they knew that it's a book. Now in this existence, do we take it as a book, or do we take it as something just happened to be? Because if you take it as a meaningful book, then that means it refers to some other meaning. And you will try to search for that meaning. You will not try to cook up some statistical analysis and save the day. You will say that, well, there's something beyond this. There's a message behind this. So let me try to understand that. So in the story, in the metaphor, and it's a metaphor, it says, when the guy saw it, he understood that this is divine speech, which means when something happens to you, good or bad, let's say Kadir was playing soccer and somebody slid and injured his leg. How should he take this? Is this just that a aggressive, stupid friend not playing properly? And in this case, it becomes a meaningless relative thing. Like you are just comparing one letter relative to another letter, because Qadir is a letter in this book, another friend is a letter, and they were just crushing each other. And it just by chance happened to be. What message am I going to take out of that? It just happens. Qadir was unlucky, I would say. And even Qadir's insurance company will come up with statistics of how people crash with each other, how much it costs, this and that. They will make a statistical analysis of such soccer accidents. But a Quranic scholar, in this example, someone with Quranic perspective, let's take it this way. Quranic scholar means someone who sees that no, everything in this life is a meaningful sign, a message from my creator. So this leg getting injured is a meaningful message from my creator. Let me try to understand what it says. I don't know how to read it, then I will go and find some way to read it. But I know that it's a meaningful text. You will look for a Rosetta Stone in this case. But you wouldn't say, well, it just happens. I mean, it's not a meaningful thing. It's just some random pictures. We don't say that it's random pictures when it comes to hieroglyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs. So this is where the metaphor goes. Make sense? Yes.
I have one question, like two questions. I'll ask them simultaneously. One is that how, like, you have a lot of experiences in life, and like, should you look at like every single experience in life and try to look at through the Quranic wisdom, or should you not? Like, there's a lot of things happening in life. Like, would I will start to lose my sanity if I try to do that, maybe.
Start with the big ones. Start with the big ones.
And then the second one is
let me inject in there. So lately I started receiving comments like this, and I see that this is sort of a correction is needed for that way of thinking. Okay, so that way of thinking is saying that, well, it is impossible. What you are saying is so large. If I go with that, it's impossible. And by that, I'm not going to do it at all, right? So, like, earning money is too hard, you know, and becoming super rich like Jeff Bezos is too hard. But still, you're working in some capacity. Maybe you're not going to get as rich as Jeff, but you are trying to fill this stomach at least. So if you're concerned about filling the stomach, you will start from somewhere. So in your life, the major things that bothers you the most, how do I make sense of them? And there are major beautiful things, and there are major sources of sadnesses for me. Let's first start making sense with them so that I get trained how to read. Then eventually reading finer print will become easy. This is why with the kids, they first learned writing with capital letters and their books just one page consisting of just one name and whatnot. But eventually they will start reading fine prints as well. So go easy. Okay.
The other one is like in the ayah it says, and he who has been given wisdom has been given great good. So here it says he like has been given wisdom. Like I'm failing to understand, like if one has been given wisdom, then how are we discussing two aspects of wisdom at the same place? Like how does that make sense in there with the ayah and everything? And is this like if it says has been given, so is it attainable, or like how do we deal with that?
Yes. What do you think about this question? You heard the second question. Okay, so the question is asking that the verse talks about who he is given wisdom as given great good. And the questioner in here is saying that, well, it looks like this is what I would call wisdom. The other one is not even wisdom. But in the text, the author is comparing two wisdoms, two types of wisdoms. So is the second one really wisdom or not? Implicitly, this is the question, right? Do you call it a wisdom? And the author actually said it's not considered even a wisdom. Like from the lens of the author, as I read it, he says the sciences, the philosophy that is not in agreement with revelation is not wisdom. Actually, it's an insult. He even said that it's an insult. What do you understand from that? What sort of an insult is that? E equals mc square. What sort of an insult is that?
With such Quranic ayahs, I think we can also read it from the other direction. As like this is something generic when it comes to the Quran, right? Quran is there to teach us a new language. Like the Quran teaches us how to read the universe and teaches us a new set of ideas, a new set of concepts, rather than you open the book and say that, you know, I know the Arabic or the whatever language you are reading, the translation in English, for instance. I know the English, so when I see wisdom there, I will insert my understanding of the wisdom. Rather than doing this, even if you are reading in Arabic, when you see the word hikmah, for instance, instead of saying that, okay, I know how hikmah is used in Arabic, so this must be what the Quran is talking about. Instead, you should let Quran teach you what hikmah is. And when you read the ayah, it says, whoever is given hikmah, the wisdom, given what? Khayran kasiran. So the great goodness, the higher, the greatness. So you can take it as if whatever you have yields higher for you, the goodness for you, you have the wisdom. Otherwise, you cannot call it wisdom. So there are, the movies and so on, sometimes we see this as a joke, like, I'm cursed that wherever I look, I see numbers. Like, or I'm cursed, I can read people's face, and it gives me so, what is it? The torture, because I can see everything and so on. So the wisdom, Quran says, is not like that. When you have wisdom, it gives you goodness. It comes with goodness. So when we apply this thing called wisdom to read the universe, if what it yields is nothing but, the bad news, then that means we don't have wisdom there. And when we apply the approach this philosopher represents, in the creation, we see nothing but just some fancy relationships, just numbers and so on. And the conclusion becomes, oh, you are nothing but just a speck of dust in this huge cosmos, which doesn't mean anything, you mean nothing. If this is the end result, the fruit, Quran says it's not wisdom, it cannot be wisdom.
So when Qadir injured his foot and went to the doctor, and as he is waiting for the doctor, let's say he is sitting in there in the room, and then they saw Qadir in pain and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Qadir. Bad things always happen to good people. So unlucky. How bad? Did you have insurance? Or not even insurance? Poor guy." Like, this is the worldview in which no good news is there. And no matter how accurately we describe how Qadir ended up with his injury, it's giving us bad news, no good news in there. Because it was a useless thing that happened to an unfortunate soul in there, unfortunately. So reading it from that angle then means, if it's not bringing me khayr, then it's not wisdom. So E equals mc square. Does it not bring us any goodness? Can we pass it there?
I'm feeling a little confused because like, isn't hikmah or like wisdom understood as like experience, sort of? Like, as you grow older, you get wiser.
I mean, that's called white hair. Oh, yeah.
I guess I wouldn't even think of E equals MC squared as like wisdom. I guess I would just think of it as like intelligence, maybe. Like, I'm just trying to understand the difference here. And also, when we were discussing akal, right? We talked about how like God gives us things, like we shouldn't think of them as, oh, like God is giving this person more because he's blessed or whatever, but like God is giving this person more because he needs more, right? Like, we shouldn't be like, oh, like God gave him so much akal, like he needs more for his training and this person needs less for their training. But then shouldn't we think of hikmah the same way? Like, if you have more hikmah, maybe that is important to get you through your training. But then at the same time, how is more hikmah a blessing then? Because if someone's needing less hikmah, then that's,
So I think the point in here would be, what is wisdom? Is knowledge, like in our example of the New York plate, is the size of it, is the color of it, is this really called wisdom? Or is it irrelevant information? Because for the purpose of that plate, what is relevant is New York is in the north. This is what matters. All the rest, it might matter for the builder of that plate because they're going to spend this much thing. But for the user, you don't really care the color, the size, or anything. You are only interested in where New York is. This is wisdom for you. The rest is irrelevant information. Our example with Rose, as Darat was mentioning, so for those who were not there on Tuesday, so let's say, I mean, it's going to be a repetition for those who heard about it before. But let's say in your dorm room, if you find a rose, you come from school, you find a rose in your dorm room, you get excited. But then your friend says, why are you getting excited? It's just gives a Latin name of the rose and says, this is such and such Famila Rosa and something, and says it has this many, what's it, DNA is this much, it has this many petals, this color, that. He gives you a lot of information about the rose itself, but said nothing about the rose, really. So this is not called wisdom. It's just irrelevant information. Actually, that person even insulted the rose being there, because not only didn't give any relevant information, but since talks a lot in the place of putting a meaning, pretending as if explaining it, he just insulted and made it meaningless object. Another person comes and says, well, somebody loves you. That's it. That's what it means. Somebody loving you must have put it in here. Go and search for that person would be your way to take it. This would be wisdom, because now it's taking you somewhere. Otherwise, you got stuck in the rose itself. Rose didn't take you anywhere. In the other example of New York, you got stuck with the plate. You didn't even move one step. But if you understand what that is, you will start moving towards New York. It takes you somewhere. That is called wisdom. So this unfortunate soul, whomever doesn't see the wisdom in there would consider him as an unfortunate soul. And for him, his injury, he gets stuck with the injury. He says, oh, bad things happened to me. If only I had a stronger leg. If only I was not playing soccer that day. He will start talking about nonsensical possibilities. But there's a fact. Somebody crushed his leg. And this is created by the creator. What does the creator mean by this? What is the message behind this? Would be a wisdom seeker's approach. Rather than taking it as some random act by chance or a stupid friend's attitude, he would rather say, but the creator created this. So what is creator's message? Okay, this guy was careless, and this is what, that is what, whatever, things are happening in a certain environment. But the creator created this. What is his message of that? So that would be the seeker of wisdom. Yes, Dua, can we take microphone?
So when we take our lives and the events that happen in it as a book, and we see them as a message from Allah, what are the ways we can learn how to read this message? So I'm thinking immediately of Qur'an and reading Qur'an, but is that the only place we can learn that learn how to read, or can we get this elsewhere?
Yeah. So we are at a good position. At least now we are saying that there should be a meaning behind this, as we have seen with the hieroglyphs. Like, this doesn't look random. There must be something beyond this. So we were seeking for a meaning in it. Therefore, we started to try to learn the language and read it. So when it comes to reading this life itself, and I am struggling to make sense of the life itself, how do I do that? Then I would expect the author of this life, because I am like a paragraph, a chapter in this book of universe. I am a chapter, and I am reading my own life, and I would like to make sense of that. What would you do? Like, if I write, let's say I'm right now talking, what I said, let's assume you didn't understand. What would you do? You would say, I didn't understand. What do you mean? You would ask for an explanation. You would expect me to give you a further explanation of what I mean by that. Do I expect author of this book to tell me what that means? Do you expect that? Meaning, do you expect your creator to explain you why he created you, what is his purpose, where he is starting you from, where he is taking you to? Isn't this your expectation? Like, you guys are all taking courses. At the beginning of the term, do you not expect the teacher to put a syllabus in there? And in the syllabus, actually at Drexel, we have to write learning objectives, learning outcomes. Like, this has to be there, because if it's a training, if it's a class, then there has to be a purpose for that course, an expected outcome of that course. What are the metrics for that? In your life, do you expect this? If you expect this, then you will start searching for it. You will say that, oh, my maker, who put this tongue over here with which we communicate, who put this brain over here, this ear over here with which I communicate and understand, I expect him to talk to me. Because this is how he set me to communicate, through speaking, through listening. This is how I learn. This is why I would say yes, there must be a speech of the Creator in a way that I can relate to, that I can understand, with which I can make sense of the purpose of my life. Hence, this is called belief in Quran, right? Belief in scripture means that actually. Being in this expectation is a matter of iman. When we say, I believe in Quran, actually this is what we mean. Even without seeing Quran, are you convinced that God must talk to me? If you're convinced, if you lived in this age, you would find Quran. If you lived 15 centuries ago, you would find Bible. If you lived 20 centuries ago, you would have searched for Torah. But it's speech of God. This is what you would be expecting. Is it only that? Like, you don't only have textbooks, you also have TAs. You would expect somebody who would get instructed best by the teacher with whom I can relate to now. So the Prophet will come, live this life, read his life along with the scripture, the Quran, and with his life explain it to me how to read. Exemplary student. And this is why, for example, at Drexel, this is what we do with teaching assistants. We hire the best students who took this course before, who did the best in the class. Now that when student asks the question, TA relates very well with the student, says, this is where you're doing the mistake. Because I went through there, I know how it means, where you're doing the mistake, immediately pinpoints the error, and student moves away from there. So in this life, in order to read the life, I am in need of prophets who is going to make me help read the life itself. Make sense? So this is where we will do it, yes.
So I'm looking at a translation of the full ayah, and it says that he blesses with wisdom whom he wills, and he who is granted wisdom receives tremendous good. And those who are endowed with wisdom and insight receive direction and guidance. So is it like pre-decided? For example, even the metaphor that the author uses, it talks about a European philosopher who essentially, doesn't have the wisdom to understand the Arabic script. While a Muslim or Islamic scholar, he does have the wisdom.
Yeah. So I'm just looking for this verse where you refer.
It's the same word,
Okay.
216, but the full text.
يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. So this phrase مَنْ يَشَاء in Quran cuts both ways. So it means to whomever he wills, and also to whomever wills. It cuts both ways. It means both at the same time. So it's clear, self-evident that if you read it as he gives wisdom who seeks wisdom, Man yasha can be read as such. But if you read Man yasha as he gives wisdom to whom he himself wills, that's also a correct understanding. But here we need to take it into how to read Quran. Like, what is the purpose of Quran? I need to read Quran within the purposes of Quran. Like today I was planning to read another text. Maybe we will read it in the future. But for example, for that text, I'm going to give an example how not to read Quran. There are verses which finishes with وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ وَهُوَ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So Arhamur Rahimin means the most merciful of the merciful ones. And Ahsanul Khaliqeen, he is the most beautiful of the creators. Quran says this. Or then there are multiple creators, and he is the best of them. Quran used to say that there's one creator, and now it is saying Ahsanul Khaliqeen. So isn't it a self-contradiction? I will need to read Quran within the purposes of Quran. Quran speaks to me to explain me something at my level. So, like for example, I mean, this happens with students a lot, especially some nitpicky students. I give the example to student to explain a phenomena, and then the student says, well, if this is the case, then how about this? And finds like a tiny, teeny corner case where he says it's not going to work in this case. Well, I'm trying to explain something unknown to you with an example. Examples are not the same thing itself, for sure. Example, if I say, like, have you ever, like, you probably ate mango, but let's say, imagine another fruit, zango. Okay, I made it up. And so I say, have you ever tasted zango? You say, no, I have never tasted zango. I say, well, zango is mango plus watermelon-ish. Okay, so if zango was watermelon plus mango, then I will call it watermelon plus mango, not zango. So zango is a new thing that you do not know, and I'm trying to explain it to you with something that you know. Quran is explaining things that I do not know with things that I do know. Hence, when reading Quran, we need to read it from that perspective. This is why when I read such a verse, I need to read it as it's giving guidance to me. So my Creator speaks to me saying that I give guidance to whom? Either if I read it as I will, then it becomes not so much meaningful because the way you are asking sounds like, well, it doesn't make any sense, right? But now that we are going with the verse itself, man yasha can be understood as whomever wills. And I say, yes, if I ask, I am given. And I can confirm that too. If you ask, you are given. If you do not ask, you are not given. So this is why I should keep asking. Like Prophet ﷺ was given revelation there in the cave, not in his bed. Like he was not just random guy sitting somewhere and then revelation comes. He was seeking for something, hence the message came to him. Likewise, if I'm not searching message, I'm just on my computer working to earn more money and say that, yeah, God is going to give me wisdom. I am seeking money, I am not seeking wisdom. So I'm not going to be given wisdom, and it makes perfect sense. The Creator doesn't give if I do not ask. So I can confirm that. But if I seek, the Creator says, I will give to you. And in my life, actually, in totally unexpected ways, really, in my experience, guidance comes. Either you came up with a person, sometimes in a very unexpected place, that starts telling you about wisdom or the truth. Or it happens that like an unexpected life event happens. You change the city, you go near a person who is going to tell you about truth. So really, the Creator drags you towards wisdom in this case. So then I can say, yes, I agree with this statement of Quran. By my life, I agree that this is how it has happened. Okay.
So continuing on that, so then the wisdom isn't the same for everyone, right? Like everyone will have something that I guess relates to them or that they understand at their level. Because if using the same metaphor, if the same Quran was given to two Islamic scholars instead of a European, they both would have slightly different books that they would write about it.
Yeah.
So is there a unified way of reading the universe as a book? Or like is that like you will be given like when you're seeking and it varies with everyone?
Yeah. How many people in this room? Is there any two same person in the room? Any two lives? Even twins have different life. They are in the same life. They're in the same world, but they are seeing a different book. Their reading is going to be different. But the question is, how can I read it in the way that the author intends me to read? Do you have this worry? Do you have this concern? Because author means something with this book, and I would like to understand what the author meant. I don't want to understand what a third, let's say, Birkan comes says, well, I guess author says something, let's say. I say, well, if possible, I would like to ask the author himself rather than a third person's opinion, right? Do I have such a worry is my concern.
So, I guess how like I found the translation and it was slightly different how I understood it. And then you provided another point of view on how it can be interpreted that way. So I guess
Which
in a
one
way
is
that,
correct? And interpretation, is this the question?
yeah, because again, like, yeah, I guess.
Okay, Brother Bikan, are you raising your hand?
Okay, something related to that, but so the same ayah, as Yusuf said, he didn't say, just for the highlighting, he didn't say you should read it this way. He said the same ayah can be also read this way. You can read it in the other way as well. Most scholars would do that. They would say Allah gives the hikmah to whoever He wants, the Allah, referring the Allah then. But even when you read it this way, so we are reading Quran to receive guidance. And Quran is talking to us at our level, right? As Quran itself describes it itself, like it is sent down to humans, right? We don't find it in our, like somewhere. It is sent down, like to our level as well. So when you read such an ayah, if you try to understand it from God's perspective, He's willing something, He wants something, He wishes something, you are already lost. Because you can only understand human experience and human state of mind. You cannot understand an absolute being, right? So this is something can be universally accepted. Like every sane person would tell you that a human being cannot understand an absolute being, right? Cannot think from his perspective and so on. You read it from your perspective. What it means when you find yourself having some hikmah, you look at yourself and you say, as Qadir says now, I said, yeah, I'm a wise person. I have some wisdom, you say. When you ask the question, where did this wisdom came from, you can choose different paths. You can say that, oh, I got it because I worked really hard. I sat in front of all the books. I look at them. Therefore, I have wisdom. You can say that. Quran comes and makes the correction. No. You have wisdom just because the creator of the wisdom chose so. So you cannot take it from his perspective and say that, wait a second, did he already decided before? Was it predestined and so on? Now you are looking from an absolute perspective that you cannot understand. All you can do, look at from your perspective. Every time you have something, you know that it is there because someone other than you chose. That's what you can see, what you can understand. So maybe related to your the question that could you repeat your question maybe?
The question,
yeah.
Essentially that, like, what's a unified singular way?
which is the right.
understanding? For example,
Oh, okay.
I read this on my own, and Dr. Yusuf didn't mention that it goes both ways. Then,
So that's the thing I'm trying to say. Like, even if you knew it from just one direction, it refers to Allah, and that's all you know. It is right. As long as you read it as, in the right way, right definition of the Quran. Quran is talking to me, telling me about things that I don't know, and it's coming from my creator, the absolute creator, talking to me. If you take it from this perspective, like your definition of Quran, when it is right, then your understanding may change but you will be on the right path at least. So you don't need to know all possible interpretations, but only one interpretation you know or you are aware of. You have to take it within the right definition of Quran. If somebody comes and tells you, given an ayah, the ayah about Abu Lahab, his hands being cursed and so on and so forth. You are trying to understand this ayah, and somebody tells you that, oh, it's about a guy who lived centuries ago. You don't have to worry about that now. It was about that guy. You can skip this ayah, somebody tells you. You'd say, wait a second, it doesn't make sense. This is the book of my creator talking to me. So this interpretation cannot be true because it doesn't fit with the definition of the Quran. Whatever you tell me must make sense within this definition. My creator speaking to me. And then comes other stuff that, this Quran doesn't come in isolation, in vacuum. It comes with a prophet. It comes with a living prophet, human prophet. Exemplify every ayah, exemplify through his life and so on. You look at that, try to understand it. But I guess, to me at least, the beginning point, the starting point is, what is your definition of Quran? And then you can compare different interpretations. If your definition of Quran is, it's a book written 14 centuries ago, then the guy was saying that, oh, it is about this Abu Lahab, you don't have to worry about that, then he's right. If this is the definition of Quran for you.
Jazakumullah khairan. So yes, inshallah, this takes a long discussion, and this is something that keeps recurring in these discussions, how to read Quran. This is how we have been studying for the past quite number of weeks. And this is the purpose of your life, my life, to make sense of our lives, and Quran interprets my life. This is why it is worthy to dedicate a life to understand Quran, because Quran is making my life or interpreting my life to me. Quran is not telling me about somebody else. Quran is talking to me about me. This is why it is the most important thing, or should be the most important thing in my life. And it is worthy to give a life to it, to whatever extent we can do that, inshallah. So let's give a 10 minutes break for Maghrib. And then after that, we will start and do 20 more minutes of discussion, and we will conclude there. So it's time for Maghrib. Inshallah, we will come back in 10 minutes. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. I think you guys have begun, but you're still muted.
Oh, okay. So did you select the right microphone? Oh, okay. So yeah, anyway, these David, yeah, the Attenborough, these fancy documentaries, when you watch them, they are so beautiful, right? All the animals and so on and so forth. But what they teach there is every animal is trying to survive and ready to kill any other animal that is, in front of their path if needed. What they do is nothing but fighting each other. If needed, they can even eat, the other's children and so on. This is what the life is described, how the life is described. So your beautiful bird, for instance, is nothing but selfish, ready to kill, trying to find a way to trick you or the others, the creature. This is what it is. This is how even we see, I mean, you will find it maybe unbelievable, but ask your parents, or when you become parent, you will see it. Ask your parents, we have some parents here, ask them how they saw you when you were a little kid. They will tell you that they see you as you trying to trick them all the time. You crying, although you didn't have any need, you cry so that you will trick them to get what you want. This is how we see our children. Even like the very little ones who does not hear, the ones even cannot walk, talk, and so on, they are nothing but tricky animals. No, yeah, Ali is the exception, of course. Right? This is how we see our children. This is how they teach us. Oh, don't let them to deceive you. So such a life is so ugly. Like even when we talk about the colors of their feathers, the birds, they become so ugly the next moment because we see that they use their colorful feathers to trick the female so that they will procreate and then leave the female behind and go somewhere else, right? This is so ugly, such a life. Doesn't matter what we say, what words with British accent we use in documentaries. So I think it's very pretty ugly when you take it this way.
I don't know if Arabic is the original language of this book, the words, because it doesn't say like it. I don't know why they translated it ugly. Like in the Arabic version, it says that they insult, like it's an insult to these beings because you're attributing beauty to them, and these beings will complain to Allah on the day of judgment. So it just says it's an insult. Like it didn't use the word ugly. Yeah. Which is what I think Brother Yusuf was saying.
No, in original.
So he uses both. Yeah. So yeah, the original text is Turkish, but he uses both. He uses both the word insult and also ugly in different places. But let me go back to the example with the rose. Alhamdulillah. So if we go back to the example with the rose, like you are, let's say, expecting there's a person that you are emotionally in expectation, let's say, okay, that person, and you're looking for a sign. And then rose comes. And then your friend says, oh, beautiful rose, and starts describing you what the rose is. But this is not what you're expecting, though. You're expecting a sign of love. You're not expecting a technical description definition but somebody says, oh, this is beautiful, cutting its relationship from the person from whom you are expecting a message. What that means is that rose itself now becomes as if somebody is mocking you. You were expecting a message, and instead you received some random, meaningless, irrelevant object. So it actually becomes as if somebody is scorning you, somebody is making fun of you. So it becomes an ugly thing at this moment. You were expecting news of love, but now that you cut the relationship from the maker, it became like a scorn to you. Somebody is making fun of you. Because in a life, if I am dying, a beautiful bird is just a source of torture for me. Like, you showed me something beautiful and you are now taking it away from me. It would be better if you have never showed it to me in the first place, because I would like to continue with this beauty. You showed it to me and now you are taking it away from me. This is torture. It's an ugly torture. So if somebody says bird is beautiful, cutting its relationship from its maker, because bird is beautiful means you're referring to the thing itself. You're taking the object as it only talks about itself, like the New York sign. But if you take it as beautifully made, you're referring to somebody who made it, then it becomes a meaningful message. If I disconnect this existence and don't see it as message, then as a human being who wants to live eternally, beautiful bird is a source of torture. Because you enjoy it, but it goes away immediately. Like, take it this way. Maybe it sounds very poetic the way I said it. Let's say you had a child. You started loving it, like first month, second month, first year. Now it started really interacting with you, and the child dies. What would you say? If only I hadn't known the child in the first place. Like, I was not longing for that child 1 year ago. Now that I know the child and I love the child and it's taken away from me, initially you thought that it was a blessing, but now having the child in the first place became a torture for you if you don't believe in afterlife. This is what it means. When I say the bird is beautiful, I am cutting its connection from its maker, which means bird is beautiful by itself. Either bird dies or you die. The beauty of the bird is going to cause you trouble. Just like this baby. And this is why I give an example of that. What happens, let's say the first baby died. A few months passed and you and your wife said, okay, let's try a second child. And Allah gives you a second child. Everything goes beautiful. 1 year old, child dies again. You wouldn't even attempt having a third child because you would say that I cannot bear this. I cannot see burying my third child. Is it a beautiful child? It's very ugly to me, you would say. It has been a very ugly experience. Likewise, saying bird is beautiful is pretty much doing this to ourselves. So this is why we make the bird ugly by saying that, oh, it's a beautiful bird, because in essence, what we mean is bird is beautiful means just bird happens to be beautiful. It's not beautifully made, because beautiful bird dies. But if it is a beautifully made bird, its beautifier doesn't die. And this is what matters. It points to a beautifier which never dies. Then bird is beautiful. Even if the bird dies, I know that the beautifier doesn't die. And the bird is just a signpost which shows me the beautifier. So I just look at the signpost, see where I need to go to. I keep working towards the destination. I don't stop at the signpost. So this is why when the author says, he's very true, how beautifully they have been, instead of saying how beautifully they have been made, they say how beautiful they are and have made them ugly. In doing this, they have insulted the universe and made it complain about them. Indeed, philosophy without religion is a sophistry divorced from reality and an insult to the universe. Makes sense? Okay, any concluding remarks? So there was one in there first, our newcomer. Summer, you had a comment? Let's hear it from you first, inshallah.
I'm curious as to why it says insult to the universe, and maybe I'm not understanding it, but wouldn't it be like insult to Allah? Like it's insulting Allah? Like
Right, but also to universe. Like for example, if let's say if you are working for, you're a Penn student? No? Where do you work? What do you study?
I'm done.
Awesome. Okay, no more. So let's say you are, I mean, this example is generally given for army. Let's say you are a United States Army officer. And when you are the Army officer, like wherever you go, people respect you and everything. Okay. And then you go to, is it Cuba? Cuba. They say, we don't care about America. Your title and all these things over your shoulder, nothing. So by denying the United States, they also insult you, saying that, well, you're just anyone. Your value diminishes in the eyes of that person. He treats you just as if you're a trash. When I say rose is beautiful or bird is beautiful, that bird was normally a messenger of my creator. It was bringing me the message of my creator. Now, if I said, oh, that's a beautiful bird, I said, well, you're not a messenger. You're a message by yourself. Not even message, you're just a thing by yourself. I reduced it from being messenger of the creator to be just an object, a random object. So it's an insult to the thing itself because its value drops dramatically. Make sense? And this is how we are treating the existence. We just say a cell. What's a cell? A cell is a live message of the creator. It's a sign of the creator, right? So if I just take it as a random thing, which we do in our biology classes, right? It's a thing that randomly developed over time. How much of an insult we do to this living sign of the creator?
Yeah, I was just gonna add to what you were saying about to kind of address Abdurrahman's question. You're talking about birds and kids, and when you say they die, it's kind of depressing for me. But the way I think about it, like I take an equation, for example, right? E equal to mc squared, whatever. And some people, we studied about this like maybe a few months ago, but we talk about this natural laws, and E equal to mc squared is basically one of those natural laws, right? When we call it a natural law, we make this like sort of assumption that it's so powerful. It's its own thing. It explains anything and everything in this universe, blah blah blah. And so this equation, it sort of takes up its own life, right? It exists on its own, and that's obviously like to universe, it's an insult. All right, and so the way I think about, and you kind of ask this like how would you approach, like if you have Quranic wisdom, how would you approach an equation like that? Like I would just say like, oh, I have these certain things in the world, and I want to try to make a connection between them. And well, Allah is giving me this particular equation that sort of trying to connect them at a certain scale. And that's how I would think about it. I wouldn't give its own life. I wouldn't even say, oh, this equation is so annoying or like something like that. I do that every day, like, but I think it's a good perspective to have. Like, it's not its own thing. It can't be its own thing, but it's merely something that we were given, and yeah.
So okay, it's a tiny example. So what we are saying is here has a very like a practical implication as well. So for instance, what we are seeing, what's happening in Gaza, let's say, nowadays. If you take from a perspective that everything happens by themselves. You are for yourself, I am for myself. You have to, like, almost necessarily, you have to take the stance that they are taking. They call it as self-defense, right? Because at the end, it is either your children or my children. And I will choose my children over yours. It makes sense. So there are many other reasons, of course, why, certain countries and certain people taking stands with them. But one of the reasons is that because most people empathize with this worldview. I mean, that's true. If some savages come and try to kill my son or my children, I will go and kill them as well. I will destroy them. Because it's clash of power. The life is so ugly from such a worldview. This is what happens. This is not a glitch in the system. What's happening there, it is not an unexpected movement. Like everybody is so surprised. What's going on? This is an expected outcome of such a worldview. And I'm not saying this only because, one side is Muslim, the other side is not. Even between Muslim people, like the Muslim nations, so-called, right? We see the same thing. It is an expected consequence of the way we look at the life. When we say everything on itself, on its behalf, this is what happens. Things become so ugly.
Jazakumullah khairan. And just to wrap up 2 items from today's discussion, one major thing that the author emphasizing here is, do I look at things as they talk about themselves, or do I look at things as they refer to their maker? This is a very major distinction. And in the metaphor the author gave, he said, is it a thing or is it a book? Likewise, is my life a random happening or is my life a book? If it is a meaningful book, then I will try to read it. So this was one of the important things. And the other one, which we referred to at the beginning, if it is a meaningful book, then the author gives meaning to it. This is why I will seek wisdom from the author. This is why the verse is talking about whomever is given wisdom. Wisdom is outsourced. The author has put wisdom in there, and I am trying to understand this wisdom of the author. But if I deny the existence of an author, I wouldn't seek wisdom of the author. I'll just try to make statistical analysis of the existence and try to satiate my curiosity with that. So this is why the approach of the Quranic scholar here was that, oh, this is a meaningful book, so let me try to understand its meaning. Do I seek meaning in my life is a Quranic perspective. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين